Well, welcome to the Celebs.com studio up at Sundance. Lucy Walker, no stranger to the altitude up here.
No.
Had a few films here, of course, Wasteland, Countdown to Zero. You had a couple here the same
My
year.
first film was here.
First film was here, Devil's Playground.
You know.
Blindsight was all over the place as well. But so for you coming back here and having a short here this year with the Tsunami and the Cherry Blossom, what is that? Does that like change the focus? Do you feel like you're freer this year? Because like, how does that feel? Is there a change?
I get very, I'm someone who, when there's a world premiere of my films, I'm very sort of nervous, and I think people don't expect me to be very nervous, but it's very, I sort of love making films for audiences, so the first time you're in a room with a big audience watching a film is a really, really big deal for me. And even though I'm also a filmmaker that does a lot of focus groups, weekly little screenings with 6 people in the edit room when I'm editing, nonetheless, jumping from the edit room where you're working with temp music and all that stuff to you do all the post-production and the color correcting and the sound, the music, and then you go back and screen it in front of a big audience for the first time at a festival like Sundance, and you're super nervous. I remember 2 years ago with Wasteland, we were, our first screening was actually the opening night, and I was so nervous. I was also so tired because I'd been awake 3 of the preceding 7 nights. I hadn't even attempted to lie down and sleep. I'd been working so hard until the last minute finishing the film. I was so tired, and when I saw the film, all I saw was mistakes. I wasn't even sure if it was in sync. I was so tired and worried, and then everyone at the end stood up before the credits even came up. And I was so upset and thought, couldn't they at least sat down till the last frame? And I didn't realize it was a standing ovation because you're so, you know, broken at that point.
Yeah.
You've just got like, I feel like you've sort of, at the football line, you know, you're there sort of dying and the ball is dribbling across the line, the crowd's going crazy, and you sort of wake up and realize that you actually did it, you got a touchdown. I feel like that. So
instinctively, didn't you feel though that you had something super
I
magical?
always knew it was a beautiful film.
Yeah.
I mean, when you know, I knew it from the moment I had the idea.
Yeah.
It was a light bulb moment. I'm like, oh, Vic Muniz, Garbage Project, you know, giving back to the community the proceeds from the art project he's done in collaboration with the people that live in the garbage dump.
Yeah.
From that moment on, I knew it, and I saw it all, and it was all a dream. But still, somehow, I still get nervous. Before that premiere, I was in the bathroom, like crying, or they put all this nice makeup on me, and I went to the restroom and cried it all. And, you know, so there you are with the mascara down the cheeks. Just, I really, it's strange. World premiere is strangely nerve-wracking. But, so being here this time is a little bit different because the film was premiered at Toronto. So for I guess for short films, they don't have to be premieres in the same way.
Yeah.
So what's a little bit more relaxing is I've already seen the film with an audience. But it doesn't make it any less special to be here. I love it here.
Yeah. And I mean, Wasteland was a very strange project for a documentary, in a documentary sense, is that because you had another eye between you and the subjects, because you had Vic Muniz and his photography and the way he was addressing some of the subjects that you would normally address directly. There was also this, it was a very unique type of documentary in that sense.
A little bit, yes, exactly right. And a lot of it was about it was about a documentary about a photographer taking photographs of people, but it was sort of a frame within a frame because it was a film about a photographer making work out of garbage.
That's right, there was an extra
that was actually a
lens in
portrait of real people. That was actually, you know, a portrait. It was sort of really interesting kind of question, a frame in a frame portraiture.
Yeah, and this one is so much more direct, obviously, and it's just these honest accounts of these, you know, people in this village that's been completely decimated by the tsunami. What did you think when you first saw that footage?
I was absolutely struck and horrified, and you can't believe it's real. And you're also, as a filmmaker, thinking, well, this is worse than any horror movie. You know, we haven't seen, how can something happen in the world that looks more frightening than any horror film I've ever seen, and it's true. You just think, well, this is beyond, and also where have we been imagining horrible things, because we didn't even imagine you could have something quite so horrible as the tsunami. And I think a little bit maybe the tsunami got a little bit overshadowed by the original earthquake, because it was the biggest earthquake that ever had in Japan, and then by the nuclear drama. And this footage that started to trickle in of people recording the tsunami with their often camera phones, or they happen to have video cameras to hand. So it's this disaster that was, you know, very extreme, and that was also really kind of a lot of video exists of it. It's kind of a new thing, I guess, that now we will have these phones and video cameras in our pocket. Some disasters are really going to be documented by the people who are really suffering and witnessing it. So I think that's kind of a new thing.
Yeah, they seem to be suffering and witnessing and disbelieving because there's a sense of inaction, in a sense that I can't do anything, I'm not sure what I'm watching, and yet the disaster that's imminent is like so unpredictable and so much more enormous than even the people watching it firsthand can even fathom.
Yeah, that's right.
So with this film now, it's been shortlisted for the documentary short Oscar.
Yeah.
Obviously an incredible honor, and
Yeah.
last year as well with Wasteland getting
Yeah.
nominated.
Yeah.
The glamour of that's associated with that, being here and having cool earrings and stuff like that, and just having come from like Mongolia or from
Yeah.
you know, Japan, and doing all this thing, that sort of dual role of the filmmaker in this sense, like, does it play tricks on your mind?
I guess one thing that I've noticed with screening the film Tsunami, the Cherry Blossom, because we've been at a few, we've had a few screenings now, is that sometimes people are really excited to come to see the film, or to come to see me when my friends are there. We had a couple of screenings that were like, they had drinks and stuff like that. And I've really noticed that you have to tell people at the beginning, you know, if there's a sort of cocktail party atmosphere, you have to give a speech at the beginning and say, you know, I want to prepare you, this is very harrowing, particularly the opening is, you know, most shocking thing I can remember seeing, really. And so just sort of change the mood a little bit, frame it a little bit for people, because it is very shocking. And to go from kind of a fun, kind of social atmosphere right into it can really take people by surprise. So you want to sort of cue that up a bit. And when I was first making this film, actually, initially we couldn't go to the region that was devastated. There were no cars. There's no bottled water for that matter. The radiation scare was extreme and very confusing. The information wasn't clear what was going on. We didn't know if the reactors were going to blow. There were no hotels. Think of how many displaced people there were. There were no cars for rent. And it's really hard to function. There was no electricity in Tokyo half the time. There were rolling blackouts. It was extremely difficult to operate in the days following the March 11th disaster.
So did you know straight away that you wanted to be there and do something about it?
You know, long story, but I was planning to go anyway. And I have always been obsessed with cherry blossoms. And since I was 14 years old and learning photography, I took photographs of cherry blossoms because they seemed to be the best subjects for amateur photography, because they really made me look like I was a wonderful photographer, because they were such just gorgeous subjects. And I also love the symbolism of the beauty, but the briefness and the kind of you know, fragility. And I have a sad story, which is I was taking care of my mom when she was dying of cancer. And it was March in England, and if you grow up in England, it has dreary winters, you really love the cherry blossom time. And my mother was looking out the window and saying she'd never see the cherry blossom season again, but here they were, and it was very emotional. And she told me that when she'd been taking care of her mother, who'd been dying of cancer when my mum was only 20 years old, my grandmother had said, looked out of the window and said, I'm never going to see the cherry blossom again. And my mom had said, oh no, I'm sure you'll get better, don't worry. My mother had always regretted the fact that she couldn't sort of be more direct and honest and share kind of an acceptance of the fragility of life with my grandmother. Instead, just was very polite and awkward about it. And somehow cherry blossom do have this quality and symbolism about talking about fragility and briefness of life, transience, and then I visited Japan when I was probably about 25 or something for the first time, and realized that there was a whole nation obsessed with cherry blossoms.
Yeah.
And
Your people.
I know. I thought, I'm not the only crazy person. There's a whole nation obsessed with cherry blossom and the symbolism and the beauty, and they have cherry blossom viewing parties outside under the cherry blossom, and they write haiku, and they drink the sake and write the haiku and have the parties and get drunk and think about life looking at the blossom in the springtime. I thought, wow, my people. But this was in January, so I was like, I've got to go to Japan and cherry blossom season one time. Cut to 2011, and my film Countdown to Zero was being released in Japan by Paramount, and I felt it was very important to go to Japan and support the movie because Japan has such an sad, important part of the nuclear weapons story because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But on the other hand, it's a tough toll emotionally, and I noticed the dates, and I thought, oh, I can look at the cherry blossom when I'm there. That would be beautiful. And then I thought, oh, and I could make a little film about it. And then March 3rd, I got my friend Kira, a producer, and we got it all arranged. And my amazing friend Erin, a DP, was going to come with me, and we were going to shoot for a little bit. And then March 11th, we were actually on the phone organizing things when the earthquake hit, the biggest earthquake, magnitude 9 ever in Japan. And the folks in Japan were asking me for my frequent flyer number. I was like, I think we can do that some other time. I think this is, you should go home and don't worry about it. And the more the news started rolling in, I thought, wow, I can't go to Japan now. And then I thought about it again, and I thought, actually, this is a much more important time to go than ever I would have imagined. This is really, I realized quite how devastating this kind of triple whammy in northern Japan, Tohoku region, with the earthquake, the tsunami, and now the radiation. What an important story to tell, and what is cherry blossom season going to be like for those people this year? And I had very cold feet, and I wasn't quite sure it was the right thing to do. I even called up my friend, the DP, the night before and said, they've got cherry blossom in New York and DC, let's just do it there. And he said, you're out of your mind. You've just got cold feet. And I was like, oh yeah. And so fortunately, he talked me out of cancelling the whole thing.
But surely you're concerned for your own safety too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Radiation was really scary. Yeah. But the initial plan was not to go to the directly affected region, to go to Tokyo, which was still, everyone I knew had evacuated Tokyo at that point. So it was still, that was a little daunting. So we went to Kyoto, where they have beautiful cherry blossoms, but it's a little bit west and away from it. And it was only after being there a few days that I realized that the real story was actually in the devastated region, and we really had to go there and see the cherry blossoms there. And everyone we spoke to was obsessed with cherry blossom and how it was keeping their spirits going. This wasn't a metaphor that was forced. This was something that is so deep in the Japanese kind of spirit. And this time was so testing and challenging, and that people would always talk about cherry blossom. I didn't sort of feed it to people. But to start with, and everyone that you met was covered in bandages, and you were in this place where you couldn't believe that more people weren't being helped, because the area was so huge that was devastated that the help was really thin. And so it was like walking in a film set of the post-apocalyptic, but it was 2 miles of everything had been turned over. All the buildings for 1, 2, or 3 stories had been blown through with water, and then there was fires on top, so everything had been burned on top of the power of the water. You couldn't believe how beat up these cars were, but there'd be a car upside down underneath a house that used to be 200 meters away. The houses had moved. You just couldn't believe the extent of the destruction. And even though I'd been seeing this footage and photos, being somewhere in there was really, really, very, very shocking and intense. And hopefully the film captures some of that, because nobody else seems to have done that much sort of filming or covering or listening to the people. And I didn't think that the people would probably speak to us. There was only 3 of us, but we're kind of 3 gringos, and probably the only foreigners who hadn't fled at that point. And so maybe it was the weird curiosity value that we hadn't fled and we'd actually were there that made Japanese people so open and happy to talk. But people were so open and happy to tell their stories and share their stories, and they wanted to make sure the world wasn't forgetting about them, because it felt like the world had. So people really opened up. And I really was surprised about that.
I mean, the news stories show such a big picture deal because it was such a massive thing.
That's right.
That having something like this to tell the personal element is
Exactly.
absolutely essential.
Exactly.
But thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us. Congratulations on having another film up here.
Thank you,
and
thank you.
good luck with the whole Oscar run yet again.
Oh, we'll touch in the wood.
Touch wood.